So for today's video, I want to do a bit of a different structure. I thought poetry, if we just look at the poem, and I'll put the words on the screen, and I'll just speak out the audio instead, so you can follow it easier. So firstly, I want to look at The Deliverer by Tishani Doshi. I'm not sure how to say it, but we'll go with that. So if we look at the title first, The Deliverer, it shows potentially ideas about the importance of birth. I think there's something almost dehumanising about it. If you call like a woman who's giving birth like a deliverer, it kind of like implies it's a woman's only purpose to deliver babies. There's no emotion to it, there's a kind of disattachment. Also, the article "the" in "the deliverer" is rather ambiguous. We don't know who this character actually is. We don't know who the poem is addressing or talking about. And again, it implies a detachment. There's a lack of personal tone. There's a lack of connection. So we look at the first line, it's in capitals. It says, Our Lady of the Light Convent, Kerala. It's in southern India. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. So the convent it's talking about, they're often used to rescue abandoned babies. So that's what it'll be referring to. And as we can see, this is not the only title in the poem. There's three. So there's this one. There's two. That's a massive lie. Sorry, there's two. So we can see the one at the top, the Our Lady one, and then there's another one later on at the airport. So I think the ideas of titles, because I've never really seen that in a poem before, is quite nice. It represents the different places, and it also represents ideas of distance between them, as they're like so disconnected in the poem and they're so separated. It shows like a lack of understanding between the two different cultures, because this one's in India and the second one will be in the USA. It shows a divide between like the Western and the Asian world, potentially. The first stanza is, the sister here is telling my mother how she came to collect children because they were crippled or dark or girls. So the sister at the top is probably like some sort of nun, because they're usually like a religious place, the convents. And then if you look at they were crippled or dark or girls, that was very sad. It's contextual, where certain babies simply just aren't worth keeping in this kind of like poorer environment, because I mean it's more expensive for a girl, because a girl can't work like a boy can when they grow up. And also things about like dark and crippled, it's being a minority and not being seen as worthy. So it shows the ideas of social and cultural pressures. So yeah, and also the language is very derogatory, like crippled, that's very brutal, it's quite offensive. Like Doshi, the poet, doesn't kind of soften the language in a way, she makes it quite raw and brutal, showing the truth. It's very factual using this shocking language. It is like generally the context of the time, and specifically the reference to girls I think highlights almost the plight of women in this part of India who are pressured to produce male children, or children who are light skinned or who are not disabled in any way. So the next stanza is, found naked in the streets, covered in garbage, stuffed in bags, abandoned at their doorstep. So they're found naked, it's dehumanising, it demonstrates how the babies are alone, they're vulnerable, they've got no clothes until they're more exposed. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, they've got no care, no affection, because like when you think of a newborn baby, you think of how they're kind of quite pampered, and like parents are usually really protective over them, or at least that's their like Western perspective. But here there's no affection whatsoever, like they're completely abandoned and tossed aside. Same with the kind of language of garbage, stuffed in bags, abandoned. I think the commas there can make it a synthetic list. So again, it amplifies the mistreatment of this baby, and also it breaks any connection between the mother and the child, because I mean how mistreated this is, you can't really imagine any personal relationship the mother has to the baby, or if she does, it's been overpowered by things like cultural pressures, or the fact that she just probably can't afford to keep this child. And I thought the potential of a new life and a new start and like a good future for this child is potentially reduced, where there's no attempt to give the child a good life. And the next stanza is, one of them was dug up by a dog, thinking the head barely poking above the ground was bone or wood, something to chew. So again, dug up by a dog, it's further dehumanising, and it's quite interesting to see that an animal has the instinct to save the child, but the parents don't. I think there's something quite poignant in that. It's almost like its instinct to like save a life. Then it's interesting to compare that with like the parents or like the mother, who didn't have the same instinct to save the baby's life. But then it is a very critical view, because I think you need to like massively consider that the mother likely had no choice. Then there's a one-line stanza of "This is the one my mother will bring." So here we're getting more of a perspective of the speaker with the personal pronoun of my. So this is a suggestion that the speaker may be the baby. So this is one that my mother will bring, implies that that is her. So there we get a connection with her adoptive mother, where this is juxtaposed with the distance from her birth parents, where she describes how she's like abandoned by her birth parents. But now here, the my mother is like, this is my real mother, in my opinion, my adopted mother. She's obviously got more of a relationship with her, or only has a relationship with her. And then we get the 3 asterisks, which further demonstrates the divide between the cultures with this physical separation. Like, it physically divides them and creates that boundary. So we've got Milwaukee Airport, USA. So again, the title of the place, again it shows the distance and like the 2 separate worlds, almost 2 separate cultures, which is so different, which we'll see in the language now. So the next stanza is, it's not Corona, it's fine. The parents wait at the gate. They are Americans, so they know about ceremony and tradition, about doing things right. So about the ceremony and tradition, there's almost like a sense of, I don't know if it's a truism, I don't know what to say, I'll put it there. But it's like the idea of selfishness and like the white parents, American parents are only doing it to make themselves feel better. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like, oh, I'm doing a good deed because I'm saving these children. So it's kind of not for the point of saving the child, it's more for their own pride. So again, yeah, heroism, it's like the white saviour complex, but like white people feel like a saviour for saving like poor children in like poor countries. But I think you need to question about like what the real motive behind that is. So again, a criticism where the American parents don't appreciate and don't understand what the child, and specifically what the mother, has been through, because they won't understand necessarily that the mother may have very likely had no choice in giving up this baby. They might like see the real parents as like an almost villain. I think you need to look at like a broader perspective. You need to kind of like understand the situation more. So the next stanza is, they haven't seen or touched her yet, don't know of her fetish for plucking hair off hands, or how her mother tried to bury her. So with that, they haven't seen her or touched her yet, there's like sensory imagery there without the seen or touched, relates to the senses. There's something quite emotional, there's something quite personal despite never meeting her. So again, like entirely juxtaposes the language in the second stanza, where like the baby was found naked, so you see there was no like connection with the birth parent and the baby, but now even these like strangers essentially who never met this baby before feel a sense of like protection and feel a sense of emotion and connection. And then I think when you switch to her mother tried to bury her, there's quite a big like jump and juxtaposition between like the more like the happier, more emotional language to the kind of quite dark language of like try to bury her. So I think it further emphasises how these American parents don't understand the culture and like the trauma and like the situation, the poverty and everything that this baby has come from, that I'll never truly understand her or truly understand like where she's from and her heritage. The next stanza is, but they are crying, we couldn't stop crying, my mother said, feeling the strangeness of her empty arms. So I think if we look at the third line, there's kind of like, I think there's something quite positive, like the speaker who is the baby doesn't like resent the adoptive parents. There seems like there's a rightness in this adoption. Like the idea that this baby is now given a second chance to live. It's got like a fresh start at a new and a good life. Again, appreciation for the American parents, which juxtaposes the presentation of their potential selfishness and the idea of more like transactional that you get in the stanza previously. And also the repetition of crying in the first and second line of that stanza emphasises the emotion of the situation, where again the American parents simply can't comprehend or understand the situation, but they're just, I think, so upset for what the child has been through, but then so relieved that they can kind of like give the baby a second chance and a new life. But again, we get the more critical view where the American parents have had the luxury because they're rich and powerful, they live in a more developed country, and they haven't suffered what her parents have, so it's kind of like they have the audacity to cry over this, but they're not the ones who've had any form of suffering implemented on them. It's quite ironic, really. And then ideas that the women in India don't confront their experience. I think we get quite an emotional response from the mother, but we'll see at the end of this poem you don't get the same response from the birth parents. I think that shows that it's too painful for the birth, like mothers, like plural, to truly like think about and feel the abandonment of their children, because they don't have the time, and also they don't have another option really, because they're forced into that situation. Sometimes they have no choice but to give away or to abandon a child, especially if it's a girl. So they don't really reflect on it because it's just their way of life, and they just trudge home again, which we'll get onto. So we've got more asterisks, and then the next stanza is, this girl grows up on videotapes, sees how she's passed from woman to woman, she returns to twilight corners. So where it says this girl, we're getting now a third person narrative, where before it was kind of like, this is what my mother will bring, then we get this girl. So there's a sense of detachment where she sees her upbringing and heritage on film. She doesn't remember it or get to like relive it by seeing like her real mother and like the same experiences again. So again suggests a disconnect and a sense of being lost. Also, since she grows up on videotapes, so she watches them and she pays close attention to where she came from, it shows how her adopted status is important to her, and she wants to know about her origins and where she comes from. She wants to appreciate the difficult circumstances of her mother, perhaps. A narrative that is often hidden. I mean, we never get the perspective of we do get the perspective of the birth parents, but it's not the same. Like, we don't get a true like encapsulation of how they feel. But I think the child, like the baby who's now grown up, wants to know what her birth mum's experienced and kind of wants to potentially empathise with it. I don't think she's like mad at her birth mum. I think she's trying to understand. So if we look at, she's passed from woman to woman, you get a sense of being unwanted. Again, there's something quite transactional. Like this is like a business deal, like she's passed like from owner to owner essentially. Also suggests a difficulty with identity, like maybe where she's unsure about her identity and where she belongs, because she's like been in so many different situations, she doesn't really know who she is almost. And like from looking at these videotapes and trying, if like the poem, like the speaker writing this poem is like her trying to connect with different parts of her heritage, and she's trying to almost discover her roots. So next stanza is the day of her birth, how it happens in some desolate hut outside village boundaries where mothers go to squeeze out life. So to the line to the day of her birth, like I said before, it's like she's trying to return to her roots to try and seek out understanding. So here she's returning to her birthplace and the experience